Welcome to the Geek Scene. After finishing my Doctor Who Series 1 review video, I decided to also make a video ranking all the stories in the series. Just a disclaimer, I am going to be ranking episodes that are part of two-parters together, as they are part of a single story. Without further ado, let's get into my Series 1 ranking. Alright, starting off at the bottom of the list, number 10 is The Long Game. Now, if you saw my Series 1 review, you probably know that I said The Long Game is the only Series 1 episode that I think is bad, so of course it takes the bottom spot in this ranking. It's trying to send a message about fake news, but I just don't think it was executed well. Maybe if they focused more on the actual fake news thing, it would have been better, but it had to share the story with the whole thing with Adam, and it just doesn't work. I like that Russell T Davies took the time to show that some people just aren't right for traveling with the Doctor, but the fact that Adam was even there felt forced to me. The Doctor really didn't like him at all in Dalek, and I get that he supposedly brought him into the TARDIS because Rose liked him or whatever, but I didn't pick up on the idea that Rose liked him that much. The companion that couldn't subplot just took too much away from the main story in The Long Game, and it made both of the storylines feel watered down. Number 9 is The Unquiet Dead. There really isn't much to say about this one. It's not bad, but it's not that good either. Like most Mark Gatiss episodes, it's perfectly mediocre. I think the idea of aliens using dead human bodies could have been exciting, but it just ends up being kind of boring. I will say that on rewatch, I did enjoy this episode more than I have in the past. This episode does drop more hints about the Time War when the Gelth mention it is the reason they no longer have physical forms. You probably wouldn't have picked up on this unless you were rewatching this episode after watching later episodes, but I think the reason the Doctor is so keen on letting the Gelth through the rift is that he feels like it's his fault they don't have bodies anymore. If you didn't know how involved the Doctor was in the Time War, I don't think you would get as much out of this episode, so it is definitely better on rewatch. Number 8, Boomtown. Boomtown is another episode I enjoyed much more on rewatch. I don't know why I didn't like it much when I was younger, because it is one of the less serious, more fun episodes. I thoroughly enjoy the TARDIS team of the Doctor, Rose, Mickey, and Jack, and I love the scenes where they are all just hanging out and having fun together. I also really love Margaret and the Doctor's interactions. As much fun as this episode is, it also manages to send a message about the death penalty, a very serious topic. There are some weird parts of this story, like the killer surfboard and the resolution of Margaret turning into an egg, but I don't mind them too much. Now, number 7 is the premiere episode of Series 1, Rose. I really liked this episode, and I think it definitely succeeded at what it was trying to do. It does an absolutely fantastic job at introducing the main characters, at least in my opinion, but by the time I watched this episode, I was already very familiar with all the characters, because The End of the World was actually the first episode of Doctor Who I watched, and I watched all of it up to the most recent series at the time, Series 6, before I finally watched this episode. When I try to watch it as if I have never seen these characters before, I still think it does a really good job of introducing them. After this first episode, you have a pretty good idea of who Rose and the Ninth Doctor are as characters. It also establishes Rose and Mickey's relationship because she doesn't even realize her boyfriend has been replaced with a plastic copy, which shows that she really doesn't pay much attention to him, and also shows that Rose is a pretty selfish person, especially at the beginning of the series. The way the characters are presented in this episode provides a lot of room for character development later on down the line. The only reason this episode is not higher on my list is I just think the living plastic and nesting consciousness thing is pretty stupid. Now we have the first two-parter on this list, number 6, Aliens of London and World War III. A lot of people don't like this story just because of the whole farting aliens thing, and I don't think that's fair. Don't get me wrong, I can barely stand the farting myself. But if you can get over it, Aliens of London and World War III are both pretty good episodes. I do think the farting drags down this story significantly, but as I said, it shouldn't be enough to completely ruin the episodes. These two episodes make up a really exciting story, especially the second part. The first part is also really good because it successfully sets up the story, and I also love the part at the beginning that shows how companions' loved ones are affected by their lifestyle. I love the idea that these aliens have been on Earth for a while, and that they stage a fake spaceship crash as a decoy. This story also features some subtle satire, since the Slitheen end up impersonating government officials. The Slitheen themselves may not be very scary, but the fact that they have intercepted the government is scary enough. I think this story is a bit overhated, and I've certainly warmed to it over time. Number 5 is The End of the World. I actually think this is the most underrated episode of Series 1, because I don't really hear people talking about it too often, which is unfortunate. I may be a bit biased since this is the episode that got me into Doctor Who, but I genuinely think it is really good. I like that it shows how shocking it can be to suddenly find yourself in the future on a spaceship, because a lot of companions later on in the show just get used to it very quickly. I like that Rose starts questioning what she got herself into when she realizes how little she really knows about the Doctor. The Doctor and Rose also have a little bit of conflict in this episode. They don't just immediately get along swimmingly, which I really like. Both Eccleston and Piper show off some great performances, especially Eccleston when Jabe is talking to him about being the last of his kind. I also like that this episode shows how disconnected the Doctor has become from humans, even though he used to be so much closer to them. He is not willing to open up to Rose at the beginning of the episode, but instead talks to Jabe, I guess because she's not human. Rose and the Doctor's relationship has some huge development in this story when the Doctor eventually tells Rose more about himself. The technical aspects of this episode are also really good, with the aliens' fantastic and unique costumes, and of course, the special effects. The pop culture references didn't age too well, but they are still funny to me, and I always enjoy this episode. Number 4, Father's Day. If you thought the episodes I talked about before this were good, this is the part of the ranking that starts getting really good. Father's Day is an amazing episode. It may seem like one of those cliche butterfly effect stories that everything about time travel seems to have at first, but I think this episode really does something different with that idea. I think that the monsters were a bit unnecessary, but they don't take away too much from the story, for me at least. I love that this episode shows one of Rose's biggest flaws, her selfishness. She saves her dad for her own selfish reasons, even though she knows she shouldn't. I like that Rose isn't portrayed as a perfect person like, some companions, but rather as a flawed individual. This leaves room for growth and character development. This episode helps Rose become less selfish when she realizes her mistake, and also more independent when the Doctor gets temporarily eaten by one of the monsters. I also really like the character of Pete Tyler. I like that he's smart enough to figure out how to save everyone, and selfless enough to do it. This story also provides some super great drama, and it really tugs on your heartstrings. And now we have arrived at the top 3 of the list, starting off with the series finale, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. I really like this two-parter. It's very exciting and engaging. I, like many people, think the second part is much better than the first. However, I still really enjoy the first part. I was really young when Series 1 came out, and I'm also American, so I don't understand a lot of the references in Bad Wolf. I've never watched any of the reality shows that are parodied in this episode, and I've only heard of Big Brother, so my enjoyment of the episode is somewhat limited. I do really like the dystopian feel of it, though, and I love that all this is the Doctor's fault, even though he thought he was doing the right thing in the long game. The second part The Parting of the Ways, is even better than the first part. It has you on the edge of your seat the entire time. The whole thing where Rose literally melts the Daleks is a bit Deus Ex Machina, I admit, but I think it at least felt earned. Rose had to have enough courage to look into the heart of the TARDIS, and she also had to find a way to get it open. Also, I just love that they literally used a big yellow truck to open the TARDIS. Like, wow. Rose looking into the heart of the TARDIS, although it gave her enough power to incinerate the Daleks, caused the Doctor to regenerate after absorbing all the time vortex energy so that Rose wouldn't die. So at least it had a consequence. I just think this finale wraps things up perfectly, and it is a great conclusion to the Bad Wolf arc, the Ninth Doctor's arc, and Rose's Series 1 arc. Now, here is what I think is the best two-parter in Series 1. Number 2, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances are two fantastic episodes that make up a really good story. This story has a really chilling and eerie feel to it, which is not all that common in Doctor Who since it is a family show. I think the first part is a really great setup for the second part, and it lays out all the breadcrumbs pretty well, but you still don't know exactly what to expect from the second part. This story also introduces fan favorite Captain Jack Harkness, and it's always nice to have him on screen, of course. I always love the little trio with the Ninth Doctor, Rose, and Jack, and I especially love Jack and the Ninth Doctor together. I think they play off each other really well because Jack's got that sort of swagger and charm that the Ninth Doctor just doesn't have. Not to say that he's not charming, he is, just in a different way than Jack is. The first part also has a pretty good cliffhanger at the end that really gets you excited for the second part. I love the way things just start coming together in the second part. It's really satisfying. I also really love the irony in the fact that the whole gas mask plague thing is a result of medical technology rather than a weapon or something. This story is just really fun overall. Moffat overdoes both the mystery aspect and the whole everybody lives thing during his tenure as showrunner, but that's a different discussion. When he did it here, it felt refreshing, and I think that some of the best stories of New Who are written by Stephen Moffat, but during the Russell T Davies era. That, however, is also another discussion. I just really love this story and think that it is great. And now, my number 1 pick for Series 1, which is pretty predictable, but it is Dalek. A lot of people think that Dalek is the best story in Series 1, but that's because it really is amazing. Like I said in my Series 1 review video, this is the best New Who Dalek story by a long shot. As soon as the Doctor realizes he's talking to a Dalek, he immediately becomes terrified and tries to get out of the room he is in. The Doctor, who has appeared to be in total control of most situations up to this point, is deeply afraid of this thing, and it's really jarring. Not only is he super afraid of it, he has this really intense hatred of it as well, which is also not something we have really seen of the Doctor before this. It makes you wonder what the Daleks could have done to cause the Doctor to react this way. Even classic fans were confused by this because the Doctor hadn't reacted to the Daleks like this before, and when this episode came out, there was still very little known about the newly introduced idea of the Time War. The way the Doctor interacts with the Dalek is just very interesting to watch, but also unsettling in a way, since the Doctor is so much more unstable than he usually is. It's really shocking to see him behave this way, and this episode just adds so much more depth to his character. The Ninth Doctor's character development is really in the spotlight in this story. We just get so much more information about him, and he also has some huge progression in his character arc when he almost murders the Dalek, but ends up not going through with it. The writing is great, but this episode wouldn't have worked nearly as well without Christopher Eccleston's performance. His acting is just spectacular in this episode, and he absolutely sells the troubled, scarred person that is the Ninth Doctor. I didn't really like this episode too much when I was younger. I guess I didn't really appreciate the darker tone. Now though, I absolutely love this episode, and it is my favorite episode of Doctor Who Series 1. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know it is a bit visually boring compared to my other video at least, but I just don't have time to edit videos like that. So I think that now my videos are going to be more like this one with, just pictures. Who knows, I could make some videos with clips again, but they just take a really long time to edit, and editing is already my least favorite part of making videos, so I don't like to spend too much time on it. But I hope you guys don't mind. If you do, that's too bad. But thank you again so much for watching this video. Please consider liking, subscribing, and maybe commenting your thoughts on my ranking, and maybe commenting your own ranking. I would love to see what you guys think. Again, thank you, and I will see you guys in the next video.